Someone talking about glyphosate and the prevalence of it. Like it's everywhere. Do you have any like stats or facts on how prevalent glyphosate is now?
Yeah. So it is the most used pesticide of all time around the globe, of all time. The amount of glyphosate that's been sprayed on this planet is obscene. It ends up not only in our food supply, but also in the water and in the air. And it ends up in a lot of our personal products.
GMO, Frankenstein, glyphosate-filled plastic nonsense bullcrap that some people are saying is food. It's not food. It's chemically engineered chemicals that make your brain feel good, but utterly destroy your body and cause inflammation in a way where your body doesn't know what to deal with it, as we are seeing. Rises in obesity, rises in cancer, rises in sicknesses and illnesses that are going up and up and up. Why is that happening? Well, our food is being deliberately destroyed and centralized by powerful forces like Bill Gates, Monsanto, and other evil people that also believe that there's too many people in this world.
We know that Roundup is associated with all kinds of illnesses, right? With gluten allergies, with celiac disease, definitely with non-alcoholic fatty liver cancer, with colon cancers, with kidney cancers, and with many, many other problems.
On Friday, there was finally some justice against Monsanto, one of the most unethical and frankly disgusting corporations in this entire world. For years, we've been hearing terrifying things about. But as I mentioned earlier, there was finally some justice with a wrinkle that I'll get to later in the story. Bayer stock slumped more than 10% in trading Monday, 3 days after a California jury awarded $289 million to a former groundskeeper who said the popular weed killer Roundup gave him terminal cancer.
This week, agrochemical and pharmaceutical giant Bayer announced they will pay up to $10.9 billion to settle a tidal wave of litigation, alleging the company's Roundup weed killer causes cancer.
Bayer, the German pharmaceutical giant which acquired Monsanto, has now made a monster settlement. Almost $11 billion to pay off around 125,000 lawsuits, most of which claiming their weed killer, called Roundup, causes cancer.
We know this stuff is safe. It's been around forever. It's been vetted. The EPA, they're on it. They know what's healthy for us. If it was dangerous, they would have outlawed it. And this has been around for a long time, and there's no indication that anybody's getting sick from this. So what are you talking about?
Yeah, if the conspiracy theorist was right, then we'd see 1 in 2 people with cancer, we'd see 1 in 30 kids with autism, we'd see Parkinson's going crazy. Yeah, they're literally repeating back, if it was toxic, we would see literally what we're seeing.
So now, because they've been using glyphosate for so many years, we now have 29 studies that show the toxicity of it. We now have 40 studies that link glyphosate to lymphoma. We now have 37 studies that show glyphosate causes DNA damage. 24 studies on hormonal disorders in children. I mean, this is criminal on a scale that is even incomprehensible. Hormone disorders in children, low testosterone, lymphoma, prenatal chemical exposure, multiple myeloma, rhinitis, Parkinson's, neurotoxicity, endocrine disease, liver cancer, chemical poisoning, low dopamine. What does all this cause? This all causes the body to break down and degenerate and to create different types of diseases and conditions. The chemical companies want to control the food supply. They want to poison the food supply. They want to patent the food supply. And they use glyphosate because of the genetically modified crops that they're producing. They're doing man-made crops so they can patent them. They're basically trying to take everything God has created and they're trying to manipulate it and change the sequencing in the DNA to where it can become profitable and it can become man-made, scientific, the difference between nature, God, and science, man. That's what they're doing. They're manipulating everything.
The company behind the maker of Roundup weed killer plans to appeal a more than $2 billion verdict against it. A jury in California yesterday found the popular herbicide was linked to an elderly couple's cancer.
We've been fighting cancer for 9 years now. It was caused by Roundup.
People are dying. People are getting sick. And they have no idea that it's being caused by Roundup. This is going to continue until Monsanto and now Bayer takes responsibility for its product.
Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be the 11th installment in my plant toxin series. So make sure you go check out the previous videos to gain full insight into why plant foods can actually be detrimental for human consumption. In today's video, we're going to be going over pesticides, in particular, the most widely used one and perhaps the most dangerous one of them all, Roundup glyphosate. Roundup glyphosate is a herbicide that was first invented in the 1950s. It was first used as a boiler and pipe cleaner because of its ability to bind and remove minerals like calcium, magnesium, manganese, copper, and zinc. Just like plant toxins prevent absorption of minerals in the human body, glyphosate acts as a toxin to the plant itself, preventing the plant from absorbing nutrients and making fruits and vegetables less nutritious. This is similar to how tannins bind with iron and how lectins bind with calcium, zinc, and magnesium in the human body, making us deficient. In 1970, Monsanto chemists Dr. Phil Ham and Dr. John Franz identified the herbicidal activity of glyphosate and patented it for use as a herbicide in 1971. The formulated glyphosate product called Roundup was first sold commercially by Monsanto in 1974, and since then, the use of pesticides around the world has skyrocketed to astronomical levels. Glyphosate is the most used pesticide on the planet in all of human history. Nothing else even comes close. Over 280 million pounds are sprayed on crops every single year, and that number is increasing. And this doesn't even count for the amount sprayed on schools, parks, roadsides, sports fields, golf courses, sidewalks, national parks, and other countries. Over 5 billion pounds of total pesticides are sprayed on the planet each year. And just like many other things, glyphosate and other pesticides are a very new addition to the human diet and the environment, as they've only been around for less than 100 years. And yet the health of the human species has deteriorated so much in such a short amount of time. So let's delve into the research here. Glyphosate exposure has been strongly linked to various types of cancers, liver and kidney disease, immune system deterioration, epigenetic diseases, neurodegeneration, reproduction, and endocrine disruption. In 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer determined that glyphosate is a Class 2A probable human carcinogen. To be able to counter this, Monsanto did some very nasty things. In what's known as the 2017 Monsanto Papers controversy, the chemical company was exposed hiring ghostwriters to basically come up with fake scientific papers and publish them to the scientific journal, tampering with the peer review scientific process and downplaying the negative effects of their product, Roundup. Fast forward to today, and Monsanto merged with the company Bayer, which is now being heavily impacted by all the lawsuits against glyphosate.
For the last 20 or 30 years, Monsanto has engaged in a systematic and deliberate campaign to attack any science that says their product is not safe and to attack any scientist that has the courage to say something. They have a corporate culture that has zero interest in safety and has only an interest in maintaining the ability of them to sell this product.
The Monsanto papers reveal the company also pushed to kill off an earlier assessment of glyphosate by the US Health Department.
They wanted to take a look at the toxicity of glyphosate. Monsanto did not want that to happen. And you can see in the documents that they reach out to the EPA and ask for their help in making this review from this separate agency go away. They reached out to very high-level officials at EPA, and they got exactly what they asked for. This review went away.
An appeals court has revived a lawsuit against Bayer AG by a man who says his cancer was caused by exposure to Roundup weed killer. Well, first of all, you and I have followed. Matter of fact, I handled some of the first Roundup cases that were ever filed in the United States. I took probably the first 3 or 4 depositions in that case. These people are absolutely devoted to putting money ahead of everything. In the 50s, you and I have talked about this, they had clear indication that their weed killer would cause cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The rat studies, they phonied them up. They took those studies, phonied it up, and the EPA found out about the studies being phonied up and still didn't do anything about it.
Right, that's what people need to understand, because you look at it right now, the EPA says, no, glyphosate, totally safe, not going to cause cancer, you've got nothing to worry about. Well, 30 years ago, the EPA was telling us a very different story. They were telling us that Monsanto, who was making it before Bayer bought them out, Monsanto lied to you. They covered up these studies. Early 90s, EPA says this stuff will absolutely give you cancer. Like unequivocally, our studies show it, their studies show it. And then a few years later, you got some lobbying on behalf of Monsanto. They created this, glyphosate task force to whitewash every horrible piece of news.
Well, what people miss about this story is it was very evident when I was taking the depositions. This is all tied into globalism, you understand. Glyphosate was going to be the thing that was going to save the planet from food shortage. You had the Clinton administration and the Bush administration say, we have to have this, we can't put any kind of limits on these folks because we need food all over the world. Well, it was a big lie. It was an absolute lie. And instead of creating anything positive, they decimated the farming industry in places like India, Pakistan, and places like that around the world.
Right, and again, totally money driven, because after they're marketing Roundup, they say, well, hey, at the same time, why don't you buy our Roundup ready crops?
Yeah.
So that way you can just spray this stuff all over your fields. It'll kill your weeds, but not your crop. And now we're at the point where recent studies showed that 80% of people tested, men, women, children across the board, 80% have glyphosate in their bodies right now.
Yeah, and the problem is it's cumulative. It doesn't. It may get rid of part of it over a period of time, but you're reloading all of the time. The biggest problem that we found in the case early on was the damage it does to children. When children are at a growth stage, it causes all types of possible cancers in that child. Everything from leukemia to cancer in the bone plates. They knew all this. And what I love about this decision by the appeals court, it says, you know what? We don't care what the EPA says. The argument was by the company was, well, the EPA told us what we could and could not label, and therefore we're protected. The appeals court says, hell no, we're not going to rely on this dysfunctional EPA anymore.
So this is absolutely disgusting, guys. Not only did they tamper with the scientific evidence and publish fake science, but to this day, the product is still on the shelves and still ruining people's health. As of today, Bayer has been subject to over 181,000 lawsuit claims and paid out over $13 billion in settlements to cancer patients, yet they still promote their product as safe. And as of March 24th, just a few days before recording this video, Bayer was hit with another $2 billion lawsuit, so things aren't looking too good for them. The reason glyphosate isn't banned yet is because the EPA still considers it safe, and according to Daubert's law, the scientific evidence must be overwhelming for any changes to be made. And all the fake science produced by Monsanto gets in the way of this. And to this day, nothing's been done because of legal loopholes, strategic defense strategies, and the company publicly denying that their product causes cancer. Well, that's funny, because cancer has actually been heavily linked to glyphosate, with multiple studies showing that it can cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, blood cancers, breast cancer, and multiple myeloma. There are numerous studies showing glyphosate's effect on the brain and neurological systems. Glyphosate has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and cause neurological damage, including spurring on anxiety and depression, causing oxidative stress in the brain, disrupting the gut microbiome, causing neurodegenerative diseases, and as many experts would also agree, being one of the main contributors to the autism epidemic that plagues our society. It's no coincidence that autism and pesticide usage both took off in the early 2000s.
I was concerned about the autism rates going up every year. Now it's 1 in 36, and we're just diagnosing it more, which I absolutely don't believe. And so I wanted to figure out what was causing the autism epidemic. And I looked for 5 years before I came upon glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. It's a pervasive herbicide. It's in all the food supply. And I believe it is the primary cause of the autism epidemic at this point. And so I've written about that, published peer-reviewed papers on that topic. Glyphosate's a slow kill. And so they have designed the studies to only go for 3 months. And Seralini showed in a study on rats that if you had a low dose glyphosate, exposed them to that chronically throughout their lifespan, and at 3 months they were looking good. There wasn't any obvious difference between the control and the treated rats. But after 4 months, they started to see problems, and by the end of their life, they had a lot of issues: kidney problems, liver problems, reproductive issues. Females had massive mammary tumors. There's a lot of evidence of harm, but it took a long time. And that's part of why we haven't been able to see that it's toxic, because it's featured as a slow kill. That's very disturbing to me. So I want to get to the bottom of what's causing us to be so sick. And I do believe glyphosate's a major player. We got a lot of other chemicals that we're exposed to, and we don't know, really which ones. But I would put my money on glyphosate. It's really very common in the food. And my friends at Honeycutt has been testing various foods for glyphosate. She's coming up with 100% of the samples are positive. Typically, like in the fast food industry, in school lunches, she's and it's just it's worrisome that we're exposed to so much glyphosate in this country.
So not only was glyphosate use went up, but the number of vaccines a child was exposed to earlier and early in life went up.
Yes.
There's several things that in and by themselves, in just the wrong circumstance, could cause brain inflammation and harm and whatever, leading to the symptoms of autism. Because
And the other thing is that there's glyphosate in the vaccines. You're aware
right.
of that?
Yes, because of the bovine component.
Yeah, because they grow, the live virus vaccines are grown on nutrients that are contaminated with glyphosate.
Yeah.
I mean, a really dumb idea, because injecting glyphosate is much, much worse than eating glyphosate.
Yeah.
Many studies have been published linking glyphosate to reproductive harm, endocrine, and sex hormone disruption. Over the past 50 years, male sperm counts have dropped over 50%. And guess what? Roundup glyphosate's 50th anniversary just passed in 2023, which I find very disturbing. Just like oxalates, lectins, and some of the other plant toxins, glyphosate has also been shown to be another main contributor to leaky gut syndrome. Glyphosate directly damages the blood-gut barrier and kills off beneficial gut bacteria, allowing foreign particles into our bloodstream. This is the very reason it's even more important nowadays to stay away from foods with a lot of oxalates, lectins, and other plant toxins, which I've spoken about in my previous videos.
The glyphosate blocks the degradation of that and increases the leaky gut. So there was a mechanism of how glyphosate works specifically with gluten to increase leaky gut. In fact, I saw some pictures that Zach Bush shared with me where he put glyphosate on a plate of human cells and immediately they separated. He put gluten on a plate of human cells and they separated. He put them both together and they separated. And I even saw a video of them separating, and then he put his product on to keep it, and it stayed there.
So liver and kidney disease is also on the rise, and there are known effects of glyphosate on both the hepatic and renal systems. Studies show glyphosate can cause liver and kidney damage. Glyphosate has been shown to affect the immune system as well, affecting the gut microbiome and tampering with basic immune functions. Glyphosate is literally deemed an antibiotic, and when you eat antibiotics, they are known to destroy your gut bacteria. This leads to a whole heap of issues.
It's crazy, but the antibiotic thing really blew my mind because I was so sick for so long and on a lot of antibiotics over the years for different issues. I just always remember the doctor saying, like, the one little piece of good advice I had from doctors was staying off those antibiotics as much as you can because they can wreck your gut bacteria, gut biome. But then when you realize that glyphosate is an antibiotic and people are ingesting it, even if it's low levels of it, chronically, every single day for years and years and years now, what is that doing to our guts? And then you look around and it's like you said, the sperm counts, fertility rates, children with fatty liver disease right now is just crazy.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Now this part deeply saddens me. Studies show that glyphosate can alter our genes, disrupting our DNA and causing epigenetic modifications that can cause multi-generational damage for generations and generations to come. The more we are exposed to glyphosate, the more our children, our grandchildren, and our grandchildren's children will suffer from the toxic effects of glyphosate. Please take a second to process that one. Now, this is all pretty disturbing news, but if you take a look at the most recent glyphosate usage map here in 2019, you can see a majority of the country uses glyphosate and is heavily contaminated. Glyphosate, when sprayed on fields, can drift in the air and spread for miles, contaminating nearby towns and water supplies, and even ending up in the rain, contaminating virtually anywhere that the rain decides to pour down at. Studies done in 2014 show that 70% of rain samples had detectable levels of glyphosate, and 39.4% of samples from streams, groundwater, ditches, drains, large rivers, soil water, lakes, ponds, wetlands, precipitation, soil and sediment, and wastewater treatment plants had glyphosate. Nearly a decade later at this point, and we can only imagine how much worse it's gotten. Glyphosate is absorbed into the soil, where it can stay there for over 1,000 days until it dissipates. Glyphosate kills anything and everything around it. It completely destroys the soil microbiome and beneficial insects and bacteria, leaving the farm and surrounding area a desolate, lifeless wasteland.
What does it do to the soil? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. It's so interesting. And like, this is the part that I love most about what I do is now I'm spending more time on regenerative agriculture because it's just wild. We can't see our gut biome, but you can see healthy soil versus unhealthy soil, and it's the same thing. And so, you go and see a field that has been sprayed with tons of glyphosate, and you see dead dirt underneath the crops. It's so wild. It's like I took out a shovel at one point, I'm shoveling through it, and I'm like, I did not see one worm. I saw a corpse of a worm, and just no life, none of the organic matter that's supposed to be there, or the biome, or any fungi or anything. So it's the same thing that we have inside of us.
Glyphosate sprayed on crops can actually be absorbed up into the plant from the roots in the soil, meaning this pesticide is fundamentally a part of the plant itself. There's no getting away from it, and you cannot cook or wash or peel glyphosate away from your produce.
So there's definitely not a war on humanity and your microbiome. Wait until you hear how glyphosate works and why you can't wash it off.
Did you know that glyphosate is a systemic chemical? And what systemic means is when you have a crop, when you spray the glyphosate onto the plant, onto the leaves, it's absorbed into the leaf and it's translocated into the rest of the plant, which means that it goes into the plant and it stays in the plant. And just because you wash your vegetables doesn't mean it removes the glyphosate, and that's the thing.
In the end, this means that our food is going to be less nutritious and our bodies are going to be minerally depleted just like the soil. There are ways to lower your exposure, but completely getting rid of glyphosate is almost impossible. This will have impact for generations and generations to come. Glyphosate is so widespread that it is being found all over the world in many different things, from fast food places to restaurants to gluten-free foods to cereals, whole grain products, our water supply, even organic foods. 100% of school lunches contain glyphosate. It's in our clothes, and it's even being found in human breast milk. Studies have been done showing that switching to a completely organic food diet can greatly lower your exposure to glyphosate, but still not completely get rid of it. In fact, many of the so-called organic foods are very high in glyphosate, so you have to really do your research and find out what organic foods are safe and not safe. Good thing we have websites like Moms Across America and glyphosatefacts.com that outline all the information you need to know. You know the system is corrupt when literal mothers have to do the job for the food and drug companies.
So it's first to me is egregious that moms have become citizen scientists and have to do the work that should have been done by the FDA and the USDA and every school board. So shame, shame, shame. I'm just saying, what the heck is going on with our regulatory agencies not doing their job? But thank goodness Moms Across America did, because they took 43 school lunches across the US and sampled them for pesticides, glyphosate, heavy metals, pharmaceuticals, particularly veterinarian pharmaceuticals, and nutrient levels. But if you want to just focus on glyphosate, 95.3% of the school lunches contained glyphosate. And if that doesn't shock you, I don't know what the heck will. And so some kids are not eating one meal at school a day, they're eating 3. And we serve here in the US 30 million school lunches per day. So they're eating that all day long with a dose of everything else, including 100% have heavy metals. And the new MDs with Stephanie and Zen, myself, the GMO Science, and the Moms Across America, we're looking at this very issue in other foods, literally as we speak.
Low levels of glyphosate, even in the parts per billion, have been shown to cause harm even lower than what the EPA deems as safe levels of exposure. And let us not forget that glyphosate also bioaccumulates in the body over time, so the exposure can add up and cause issues later on down the line. So after all that terrible news, how can we possibly limit our exposure to this toxic herbicide? Well, a few things we can do is switching to a completely organic food diet, excluding oats, gluten-based, and even some gluten-free products, and sticking to the foods that are on the EWG's Clean 15 list, which I talked about in my previous video concerning grocery store chemicals. For more in-depth knowledge, go check out glyphosatefacts.com.
This is what's also crazy. So you might think with glyphosate that organic, if you're buying organically, it's not supposed to have glyphosate used. And so then when we run some testing, we find that, oh, actually in some organic foods, you still find glyphosate, which is very disappointing because you think you're paying a premium to not have it. So then the question becomes, okay, where then is this glyphosate coming from? And what's happening is that because if you have an organic farm, you can't use synthetic fertilizers. So they're taking the manure as fertilizer from these animal farms. And those animals that produce that feces, they've been eating the glyphosate ridden corns and grains. And so they poop it out. It is transported over to the organic farm. It's put out on the soil. And now you have the same situation where, it's acting as a mineral chelator. It's leaving these residues in organic food. And so it's a hard thing that organic is going to need to steer clear of, because once these things start getting unveiled in different consumer products that glyphosate is actually present after you pay this premium, it's very disappointing to the food manufacturers.
One thing I might add that's very important to know is that meat, eggs, and dairy have some of the lowest levels of glyphosate, and buying organic grass-fed meat is even lower. So it's no wonder the carnivore diet is so healing to our guts and our chronic health issues. Just another reason to give the carnivore diet a try, in my opinion. The agrochemical company Bayer has undergone billions of dollars in lawsuits, and the scientific evidence against glyphosate is growing. Yet no matter what we do, Roundup glyphosate will still be used and still be sold all over the country until the EPA bans it.
Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention, because this is something that is very scary that's happening right now. So Bayer could very likely go bankrupt. Bayer, who bought Monsanto and owns the Roundup name. So they are likely to go bankrupt because they're already $13 billion into paying off plaintiffs for their cancer. And they are refusing to admit that it causes cancer. And so instead, they're trying to cut off all litigation by making it illegal in this country to sue pesticide manufacturers if you get sick. So this is a big pesticide liability shield. And while a bunch of us that work on pesticides were focusing on the RFK Jr. campaign, they went crazy.
We have breaking news that a law giving liability immunity to pesticide producers is on the Georgia governor's desk. Georgia Senate Bill 144 will give pesticide producers like Bayer, BASF, ChemChina, and Corteva liability immunity from lawsuits associated with any adverse health effects or harms to crop or property from their chemicals. Another example is glyphosate produced by Bayer. In 2019, the EPA banned cancer risk warnings from being included on glyphosate labels. This was in response to California putting a Proposition 65 cancer and reproductive harm risk label on glyphosate. Since the EPA has been co-opted by the chemical industry and pesticide labels don't have accurate risk warnings, Senate Bill 144 will give companies like ChemChina and Bayer complete immunity from liability lawsuits. The partisan bill was introduced and sponsored by 20 senators in February and just passed the Georgia House with a 101 to 58 vote. Senate Bill 144 only needs Governor Brian Kemp's signature to be passed, which would be a significant loss for our health, farmers, and food systems. Pesticide producers like Bayer have recently been ordered to pay out settlements for chronic diseases caused by exposure to their pesticides. The pesticide manufacturer's goal to be free of any liability was made clear in the bill when it stated that every effort must be made to strengthen the United States production of pesticides. In addition to blocking lawsuits from future exposure, the bill would also block people who had exposure any time in the past. The chemical companies have been calling voters to push support for the bill by claiming that it would help farmers. What the bill actually does is strip the few rights that exist from farm workers, rural communities, school children, and Americans. Georgia is one of the many states, including Montana, Missouri, Idaho, Iowa, Florida, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Tennessee that have introduced acts for liability immunity for pesticide manufacturers. The agrochemical companies Bayer, BASF, ChemChina, Corteva, Drexel, Vanguard, and Chemours have lobbied millions to both state and federal representatives in all of the states. I've been continually speaking out against these bills for the last 9 months, along with Moms Across America and Glyphosate Girl. It's important that everyone contacts the Georgia governor's office using the number you see here on the screen to communicate that we do not support Senate Bill 144. If you want to see the bills in other states and get contact information, you can check out my blog post at myhealthforward.com, which I linked in my bio for you.
As the war to ban glyphosate rages on, these chemical corporations are pushing to acquire liability insurance in the House. And if it passes, the use of glyphosate will be a part of our daily lives for the foreseeable future, despite the scientific evidence against it. So that's it for the video, guys. Regardless of whatever diet you're doing, at least have enough self-care and common human decency to limit your exposure to these foods and help encourage safe, local farming practices without the use of pesticides. Your future bloodline and fellow human beings will thank you. So we've been taught all of our lives that fruits and vegetables are good for us and that they are necessary for a healthy diet. But our ancestors tell us a completely different story. Stay tuned for the final episode of my plant toxin series, where I go in depth on how plants, yes, your fruits and vegetables, actually produce naturally occurring pesticides within their own bodies. So not only are we eating them with things like glyphosate and other man-made pesticides, but also naturally occurring pesticides, overloading our bodies with so many different chemicals. Hey guys, I'm just pitching in here real quick to update you on a few new developments that actually happened after the recording of this video. So, as shown throughout the video, these big agrochemical companies are pushing for liability shields in the House all across the country in different states, implementing laws that make it impossible for us to sue them for the damage caused by their products. As of March 26th, the Iowa State Senate has passed the Pesticide Liability Shield Bill, meaning the use of glyphosate will not only be continuing, but now companies like Bayer will not be responsible for when we get sick from glyphosate. The states next in line to pass this bill are Tennessee and Oklahoma. This is terrible news, as it means glyphosate will continue to be used for the foreseeable future. Not a lot of people even know about glyphosate or understand exactly what it is. This is why it's important to please share this video and help it reach a bigger audience, because otherwise these agrochemical companies will continue to poison us. I already signed up for myself, but I'll post up some links so you can help out and try to fight back against this corruption. This is a humanitarian issue and needs to be addressed in order to save the future of the human species. God bless you all. Keep fighting for the truth, and I'll see you in the next video.